Hello and welcome to the latest edition of On the Whistle here at Bradford City. James may join me in a little bit. He's just down speaking to Remain Mundle, but I'm just going to talk through the game a little bit and answer some of your questions. Undoubtedly, a poor night for Sunderland. I mean, we've all seen these kind of games before, where you have a lot of new players, you ring the changes and you come up against a really committed side. And sometimes you can get caught out, and pretty much from the first minute, really, Bradford were on top here. They looked really up for it. The intensity was there. And Sunderland were poor. They were a bit lucky not to go behind in the first 10-15 minutes. Then sort of steadied, but didn't really threaten too much. I mean, to be honest, they didn't threaten the goal too much throughout the entire game. And then just a real sort of poor 5 minutes before half-time, conceded two really sloppy goals, albeit one a brilliant strike from Andy Cook. Second half was much better to begin with, forced a few saves, scored a really good goal, and then really fizzled out towards the end. So I think you have to be honest and say obviously this was a big opportunity for a lot of players to try and put their hand up and try and sort of show Régis Lebris that they want to start against Cardiff, that they're ready to play a big part this season. I have some sympathy, and it's never easy when you're playing, a lot of these partnerships, again, never really played together before, a few players out of position. So I wouldn't go too strong, but it's also fair to say that, the performance level across the board wasn't great. One player who stood out by a mile, Remain Mundle, was excellent. Bradford couldn't really get near him. First half, he was Sunderland's pretty much only attacking threat, carried the ball superbly. There was one instance where he picked the ball up deep in his own half and carried it all the way to the edge of the opposition box, and it took a real cynical hack to actually get him down on the floor. Scored a really good goal in the second half as well, took it really well. A real breakout performance from him. I think he's been solid in pre-season, he's looked sharp at it, and tonight he just took that another level, so fair play to him. That was the one positive to take from an otherwise really disappointing night, and there's no point in pretending otherwise. Going to go straight into your questions. Ethan Todd, hi Ethan, says whether we sign a recognised striker or not, how much impact do you think Reece will have this season? I think that I saw some good signs from Reece in Spain, especially when he came off the bench in the Forest game. I thought he looked lively. I have to say that tonight the game passed him by. He didn't look comfortable in that central sort of forward role. Put himself about in the second half in particular, but never really had the beating of his opposite number. I thought the defenders did a good job on him. The link-up play with the players around him wasn't really there. The best performance I've seen from Reece in pre-season was when he shifted onto the left against Eldense, and I think that question mark about whether he's an out-and-out centre-forward or whether he's actually better operating from the wide areas where he can sort of dive in, field and sort of get a goal that way, I think that question is still very much alive. I think obviously you don't want to draw too many conclusions from pre-season games because there's all the factors around it. But I think at the moment, he, let's be honest, he hasn't really put his hand up to be that striker against Cardiff. Mienda's ahead at the moment, and I like what I've seen from Mienda, but we all know it's something they need to sign a striker this summer. They need an experienced striker in, because at the moment, I think it's hard to see Reece doing that role. At the moment, from what we see of him and what we've seen in his Sunderland career, there's some good things there, but a lot of his best football has been as a wide forward. So I think there's a big question mark on that going forward. Mike Smith says, do you think Rig has to play tonight? Looks like bench for him v Cardiff. Him and Mundle probably the only contenders, but if we still got Clark, Mundle won't start. Yeah, I think actually if you look at it, Rig's match minutes have been managed really, really carefully this season. So I do think he's in contention to start against Cardiff, but if you actually look across the last few fixtures, he's played fewer fixtures than everybody else in that category, which makes sense because he's so young. So actually I think he was always in line to play in this game. I still think it's a bit too close to call with him and Alan Brown, because there's a big question mark over Alan Brown's match fitness, which he's still building up. So I wouldn't read too much into Rig playing tonight, and although it wasn't his best performance across the pre-season programme, I wouldn't read too much into it. So I think maybe Brown's slightly ahead because of his experience, but I still think Rig's going to have a big part to play in that game. Agree with you that Mundle was the only other player really who at the moment you could see pushing his way in for that Cardiff game. Clearly he's not going to start. If Jack Clark is still here, Clark's going to start, but I think Mundle's shown that he's kind of first in line, and he'll definitely have a part to play off the bench. James, are you going to come in and join me?
What have I missed?
I've just been chatting through the game, and we answered a question about Reece, who I think it's fair to say, at the moment he's playing better when he plays out wide. I think not really much of a chance of him pushing Mienda at this stage, and obviously I've just stressed again that Sunderland need an experienced striker, which I think is fairly obvious. Let's have a look at some of the questions. Just off the bat of Mundle, someone else said, do you potentially think Mundle can start on the right hand side ahead of Roberts? Listen, I think Roberts has had a decent pre-season so far. He's looked really sharp. Lebris has mentioned that he's really happy with his physical condition. He got a good assist against Blackpool. I think Roberts is first in line. I've got no problem with that. Listen, you're going to need substitutes, right? It's not all about the starting 11, and just because Mundle isn't going to be in the starting 11 against Cardiff, probably, I don't think we should see that as any kind of major slight. I think he's there to make an impact, and he's banging the door down. Thoughts?
Yeah, Roberts for me at the moment. I thought Mundle was good today, but just not quite ready to sort of unseat him. I would love to see him coming off the bench in a championship game, but in regards to Mundle, really, really positive signs. I think what the one bright spark today in a pretty dire performance, really.
A lot of people asking about how much of it is a concern in terms of the performance level, people maybe not really pushing their claims. We'll kind of deal with that all at once. The one thing I would say is, like, this does happen. We've seen Sunderland lose to Hartlepool just before the season starts because these teams tend to put out their strongest 11. Sunderland, obviously a lot of new partnerships. I don't want to make excuses, but we have seen it happen, and it hasn't had much of an impact on the season. So
the last time we lost to Bradford, we ended up finishing 6th.
Exactly, so we lost 2-0 here a few years ago under Alex Neil with, again, a very much a changed team. And then after that, Sunderland went and signed Ella Sims. They made some good inroads in the market, and the team, had a brilliant season. So I wouldn't get too concerned with that. What I would say is, tonight didn't absolutely show that there isn't probably a huge amount of depth in this squad in some key positions.
There's a lot of players, but
but ultimately, Sunderland finished 6th that season because at this point, when they played Bradford and lost, they didn't have Ahmad, they didn't have Ellis Sims, and I remember Alex Neil saying we've got a lot of work to do on the training pitch, but also in the transfer market, and that still stands now. So while I'm not sort of in despair, and I don't think we should read too much into this performance or get too carried away, we also shouldn't ignore the fact that there is some really important transfer business still to be done.
I think personally, for me, I am, I take the points that it's pre-season, that Sunderland's work in the transfer market is not done. It was a second-string team, but for me, I think against League 2 opposition, yes, it was their settled side, but particularly that midfield, Chris Rigg, Elliot Hamilton and Adil Ashish, they had enough quality that they, for me, really should have gone and tried to imprint themselves and really dominate that midfield. It didn't happen. You had Richie Smallwood, who's a fantastic AFL operator. He didn't really have too much pressure on him playing as a number 6. I thought that was one disappointing aspect. Yes, I take your points that it's pre-season, but I just would have expected a little bit more there.
The only thing I would say is that was Hamilton's first 90 minutes for 2 years, maybe.
You do have to caveat that with Elliot
so that's
Hamilton,
the one thing I would say. Bit of chat about Hamilton, interest from Blackpool. Clearly it's not imminent because he was here tonight and played, but he's in the last year of his contract. There's obviously something going on there. Thoughts on that? Personally, it's hard to see him being a regular this season, but I also think Sunderland shouldn't rush into anything too hasty. I think ultimately, yes, I'm a bit biased because he's a homegrown player. He scored that goal at Wembley. I'm always going to root for him. What I would also say is, over a period of time, his goals contributions when he's fit at a number of clubs at every level he's played at is decent, and there's not too many players in this squad who you can say the same for. I'm not saying Sunderland have to keep him, I'm just saying I think that's a really interesting debate. What do you think?
I do think he's going to find it hard even if he remains fit to break in. I would back him. I think I made the prediction that wherever he goes, I think he's going to have an impact if he does stay fit, and I would stand by that. I think the best thing for Elliot Hamilton is to play football and to play regularly. Blackpool he's familiar with. It is a move that makes sense. I would be really sad to see him go on a personal level because of what he's done for the club. It was vital in them running in League 1. He's had horrible luck. He's a homegrown player. Big fan of his. I think he's had some really, really rotten luck in terms of injuries, even going back to the Jack Ross days. Jack Ross wanted to hang his hat on Elliot Hamilton. It didn't happen because of those injuries. So I think it makes sense for him probably to go. I will be disappointed, yes, but if he stayed, I'd be delighted as well. I'm not sure where he fits.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, but I don't think Sunderland's rushing him for that reason. That there aren't too many players in the squad who produce. He has got
quality. He has got bags of quality.
But I can see why maybe it will happen. So we'll wait and see on that one. Another question saying, should Sunderland look to bring in another right back? Listen, we're not going to pile in on any individuals. It's pre-season. It was a poor performance across the board, but I think it's fair to say there's a big gap between Hume and Pembele at the moment, and I think. Pembele did well in a couple of games last season. He looks like he can be trusted to play right wing back, but there is a big gap at the moment between him, isn't there? And I think if Sunderland should be open to maybe doing something in that position.
I think so. Yeah, I think you could look at that position and certainly look to strengthen. I think if Hume was to go down injured, God forbid, before the start of the season, would you want Pembele in right back, or would you start looking at somebody else? At the moment, I'd start looking at somebody else, whether that was in the transfer market or putting O'Neill at right back or whatever that was. I think Pembele's just been offered for me in pre-season, which is bizarre to me because I think
you felt he had some momentum, really, didn't you?
Back to under Mike Dodds at Leeds away and stuff like that. I know it was right wing back in a different system, very different demands, but I thought he looked decent, and I did think he was starting to to get somewhere, but perhaps he is just a better right wing back. I don't know, but it's a little bit of a puzzling one. I'm not really sure what's happened there, because from memory he's been fit all the way through since coming
January,
back, hasn't he?
pretty much.
I know he was out for a long time and he struggled to get momentum. Look, I think we should always caveat with these players as well. He's coming over from PSG. There's a period of bedding in. I know he's been here for a little while now, but different country, different culture. It does take some time for these players, and we should always, I think, acknowledge that. Although he was poor tonight.
Yeah. So I think that's about it really. Loads of you asking about the backroom team, concerned about sort of the support for Labrice. Loads of people asking about the striker situation. Is the same as the other day. Sunderland have to do it. No sign at the moment, which is pretty concerning.
I think the Mendy one's
but
interest as well with the Mbappe takeover.
Yeah,
that is so something that might be the thing that spawns that.
Yeah.
We don't know that for sure yet, but hey ho.
Listen, some concerning signs tonight, no doubt about it. Hopefully, it's one of those that we look back in a few months and just say it was a classic pre-season night. But Sunderland definitely have some work to do. We'll be back on Saturday after the Marseille game. Hopefully, a little bit more positivity. Hopefully, Sunderland can produce a performance. But thanks for watching as ever, and we'll see you Saturday.